I looped it like an actor would voice, what do you call it, lip syncing, but there was no lip, so I was lucky. I just watched his body language and in the second one, Kirshner, because by now David Prowse knew his voice was not going to be used, so he just sort of threw the lines in. And Kirshner gave me a soundtrack with him doing the voice of Darth Vader. Kirshner's voice is like this, and I'm imitating him badly, but it was scary as hell. Kirshner was scarier than I could ever be. I remember the second when George had a chance to counsel me. We said we don't know what we did right, so let's just try what we did. And naturally, I wanted to make Darth Vader more interesting, more subtle, more psychologically oriented, and so he said, no. What we're finding out is you got to keep his voice on a very narrow band of inflection, because he ain't human, really. So that was the answer.
Welcome, Masters and Padawans, to episode 556 of Full of Sith. It's me, Brian Young, and with me as ever, the redoubtable Holly Fry. Holly, how's it going?
Very good, because I'm deeply excited about our guests this round.
Yeah, we've got two very extra special guests this evening with us. With us tonight, we have Ann Newman and Steve Sansweet of Rancho Obi-Wan. Welcome.
Hi, guys.
Thank you very much. Good to see you guys.
I feel like we need crowd cheer noises for just these moments.
We've got a very long history with Rancho Obi-Wan and Steve in particular. Steve was the very first guest on Full of Sith 556 episodes ago.
Wow.
I remember every minute of it.
Yeah. I hope so. It was all glorious, trust me. But so we're here to talk obviously about Rancho Obi-Wan, and you have your gala and your fundraiser coming up, and we're definitely going to talk a lot about that. But some really sad news hit Star Wars this week, and as we're recording this, and maybe as you're listening to it this week, we learned that James Earl Jones, the voice of Darth Vader, passed away. And we thought we'd talk about that a little bit before we jumped into all of the fun stuff, and maybe the fun stuff could be a bit of a palate cleanser, but yeah, I mean, that who could forget that iconic voice?
Nobody.
Did it hit everyone harder than you expected? Because I thought, like,
he would live forever.
Yes. Yeah, it kind of messed me up in a way I was not prepared for.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, he was a cultural icon. I mean, and he was a superb actor, obviously not just for Star Wars or Mufasa, but for all his Broadway activities, his movies. It was just one amazing guy.
And my favorite movie of his, Conan the Barbarian.
Yeah.
What a great movie. He was so evil. Love that movie.
I think everybody forgets how great he was in Doctor Strangelove as well. Like, he got to be in a Kubrick movie.
So good.
Yeah.
I really loved him as Barney Hill in the Betty and Barney Hill story, where they were, the couple that was one of the first instances of an alien abduction, and their story was told on film, and he played Barney, and it was amazing. That could have been really hokey and weird, and he made it incredibly compelling and really, really wonderful.
And he came from a very tough background. The story that's been repeated so many times about how his childhood was really sort of not great.
He had a stutter.
He had a stutter. He stopped really talking for about 8 years until a teacher sort of recognized his abilities and got him to read one of his own poems in class. And that got James interested eventually in acting and speaking and debating, and So he was truly a self-made man.
Can you imagine if we had been deprived of that voice because no one had ever realized what his potential was? Thanks to that teacher, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Star Wars would feel very different.
Oh,
And it's interesting. I mean, it's George Lucas sort of put together exactly the right combination of elements with Star Wars, whether that was by um, chance or whether it's hard to imagine. You know, George Lucas will be the first to say that like it's not that you have to learn how to make a movie. You have to learn how to make the movie that you can make on the day, right? Like, and that he got all of the elements to come together and that James Earl Jones worked out. And, you know, I watched a clip where James Earl Jones talked about how he recorded his entire session of Darth Vader dialogue in 2 hours with just George Lucas and them in the booth, and how that came together to become something so important in the history of cinema. You know, just generally, even if Star Wars, even if A New Hope was the only movie that had come out, um, it would be so striking and still so remembered, even without all of the rest of the stuff that came afterward. But then to sort of cement that with "No, I'm Your Father" and every other performance he had, it's really amazing. And you know, it was one of those things like you kind of just assumed he'd live forever. You know, he was 93, so there was no reason to think like he'd stop at any point.
right. Oh, I'm glad we have all of the many, many performances we have so we can all
Yeah.
keep
Well,
enjoying it.
and his performances will continue with the use of AI
Yeah.
because a year ago he agreed to let his
Mhm.
voice be used by Lucasfilm for future Darth Vader projects. So I think that's very exciting. We'll see how that turns out. But he
Indeed.
was Vader not only in the movies, but in video games, TV commercials, and other places.
It's interesting you listen to or read any of those interviews with him, and he always kind of talked. He really downplayed his contribution to Star Wars, and really talked about how his voice was merely like a special effect for the movie. Um, so it kind of makes sense that he'd be like, yeah, go ahead, do that because this is the thing it adds uh to it, which I'm sure Dave Prowse was thrilled about.
Yes, and we know that for a fact.
Yeah, yeah. No, I it's hard for me to imagine that Dave Prowse ever seriously thought he'd get to be the voice of that character, but that's okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And
yeah.
James didn't even admit it until Return of the Jedi. Is that not correct?
It was his decision not to be credited in Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because it does create like an extra level of, for people that maybe had not heard of him before, Darth Vader just existing as his own entity without any of the baggage of a human performer behind it. I'm sure that cemented it in the zeitgeist even more to be like, there's this super scary guy. I don't know what he's about. I don't, you never see a face.
Or
Yeah.
maybe it was just more confusing for people who did meet Dave Prowse, who was credited.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, why don't we talk about the Rancho Obi-Wan fundraiser? This is normally something that happens at Rancho Obi-Wan, but this year things are a little bit different, right?
Well, it's different also because we haven't had an in-person fundraiser since 2018 for various reasons. A couple of
Yeah.
years in a row because of the pandemic, we had virtual fundraiser. But this is our first in-person fundraiser since 2018, so we have a lot to catch up on. And as you said, it's our first fundraiser that is out of town for us in Seattle at the MOPOP, the Museum of Popular Culture, which Paul Allen founded. A museum that started out with a focus on Jimi Hendrix and other kinds of rock legends and guitars, and has evolved into a science fiction and music museum, which were Paul Allen's two big hobbies.
And it makes a perfect venue for us because they have several exhibits there with Star Wars items in display. And we are bringing, to complement their theme, an exhibit of Star Wars guitars.
Oh, cool.
At least 10, maybe up to 14 different Star Wars guitars. So it's a great venue. It fits a lot of people, a lot more people than we can have here at Rancho Obi-Wan. And I think it's very complimentary. And if you've never been to the Museum of Pop Culture, it's just fun. It's just super fun.
It's a great place. And of course, two of our directors live up in Seattle and have amazing collections. Gus Lopez, who probably has the best collection of Star Wars props and costumes and prototypes of toys. And Lisa Stevens, who's our director, married to Vic Wertz, and they have an amazing collection also up in the Seattle area. And both of those collections are available for special tours at their homes as an add-on to the fundraising ticket.
That is very cool. Also, Mopop is just a great museum. I mean, it's a fun space to be in. Greedo is there.
Yes.
It's a really, really beautiful space, and they have really nice displays. So I'm envious. You guys announced the dates, and I was like, I'm already booked that weekend. So I'm
Oh.
heartbroken because I love both you and the space.
Well, we're heartbroken as well.
Yeah, no, Holly and I were both at the 2018 fundraiser, and it was, I think, one of the most fun times I've had doing Star Wars stuff. It was just a blast.
It
And
was a
Awesome.
blast.
it was the same. It was like, oh no, I've got stuff that weekend and I can't make it, and I feel awful about this. But you know, we love Rancho Obi-Wan, and I'm doubly disappointed. I was doubly disappointed when I found out that I would be able to tour Gus Lopez's collection, because like, second to yours, Steve, like his stuff, looking at it on Facebook is the stuff that I'm always just drooling over.
It's a truly amazing collection that he's put together.
Yep.
Yeah. And it's always fun to see him pop up in documentaries too, because it seems like he's the stop when somebody's like, oh, we're talking about this little bit of Star Wars ephemera, and they're like, oh, and here we are at Gus Lopez's house because he happens to own this piece.
Yeah.
Yeah, Gus's collection is super diverse, and not only does he have the screen use props, but a fabulous collection of cereal boxes from
Yeah.
all over the world.
Cast and crew items.
Mhm.
I mean, he's he really drilled down deeply into Star Wars memorabilia.
And as a bonus, Gus's wife, Pam, probably has the world's largest collection of Stitch, of Lilo and Stitch.
I didn't know
So
that.
Not only, yes, so not only Star Wars stuff, Stitch stuff.
If we can get her to open the closet door, yes.
Maybe. So previous galas have been super duper fun. Bless you, Anne, because you have cooked for all of us. Listen, you made me appreciate barbecue in a way that I had not before, because I was not a
Thank you.
barbecue girl before I visited you. But like, you always cook for us. It's very much like a relaxed kind of family vibe. Everybody can walk through the collection, and then there's the auction. How is this year in a new venue going to play out differently? I'm presuming you are not bringing your R2 smoker up there, but who knows?
No. Mopop will be catering the event, and we're going to have a lot of great food there. Everybody will get one free drink ticket. We will have our traditional live and silent auction. We are also going to have a general store with merchandise and other Star Wars memorabilia for sale. And Mark Daniel is going to be our MC, who you might have seen at Star Wars Celebration. stages.
And online, because he's a popular influencer, has worked for Disney off and on in Orlando for 30 years. And the Mark has become a good friend. And he's been here at our past galas, some of our past galas.
Yep.
And we're looking forward to having him as our MC.
We've got the 501st is coming for photo opportunities as well. And Steve's going to get up on stage and talk a little bit about Rancho Obi-Wan and what Star Wars means to him and fandom.
And we're going to make some
announcements.
Maybe.
Oh, maybe an announcement.
Maybe, if you feel like it.
No, I think we'll feel like it. So we've been strategizing about the future of Rancho Obi-Wan for several years with our board of directors, and we've got some interesting things to explore, and it's time to open it up to the entire community.
I can't wait. I can't wait. You mentioned the auction. Can you give us a verbal sneak peek at what kind of things are gonna be up for people to bid on?
Well, there's going to be some amazing things in the live auction. Continuing with the theme of guitars, there will be a Fernandez Boba Fett guitar, and along with it will be guitar lessons provided by Britt
Whoa.
Lightning of Vixen.
That's amazing.
Right? Totally amazing. Also, as with our other live auctions in the past, Skywalker Vineyards has offered a private tasting of wine in Nicasio, California.
At Skywalker Ranch.
At Skywalker Ranch.
So it's an opportunity to visit Skywalker Ranch to get this wonderful wine. So it's a great wine tasting. Now they have 3 vineyards, one in California, one in Italy, and one in France.
And you get to taste all of those wines, which are all amazing. And Charmaine Cuddy, our good friend from Canada, is offering a special commissioned crocheted blanket. She has donated a blanket to each one of our auctions. And so this time, though, you get to pick the theme and the character you want to have woven into the blanket. So a lot of great things. And then many silent auction items donated from everybody, from Hallmark, Prop Store.
Artists like Mark Ratz of Australia.
Peak Burning. Walt Crowley. Lots of people. Yeah, lots of prints, lots of celebration prints.
Oh,
So-
dangerously good. Dangerously good. I'm already like, how do I make this happen while I'm in another state?
And probably by the time this airs, a partial list of the auction items will be listed on our website.
Perfect.
ranchoobiwan.org.
Well, I'm curious, what do you think has been the biggest change in Rancho Obi-Wan since it started over the years? Because it has evolved slowly in some ways. What do you think when you look back from where you began when Rancho Obi-Wan started? What do you think has been that biggest shift now that you look back on it?
Lack of space? No, just kidding.
I don't know. Anne has managed to find space to squeeze things in, and if not, well, we have an offsite warehouse that's almost as big as Rancho Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
So lots of items, and it makes it fairly easy to switch out displays for new things, or for old new things, or for new old things. So
I think storytelling has evolved. It started more as, we told stories about how you got specific objects, but now we have like a bedroom display that evokes all kinds of wonderfully warm, nostalgic feelings in everybody, that tells the story of what your bedroom would have looked like in 1983. We have an art gallery that is now only original art. So no print replicas. It could be a print from original digital. but all of it is completely original art. And Steve's passion over the years has grown more towards fan-made items and original art, which just brings a wonderful, colorful diversity to the museum.
It just speaks about what makes up the community of Star Wars fans worldwide and the ability to play in the sandbox that George created so many years ago. And Lucasfilm letting people have that experience and being able to interpret Star Wars in many different ways without fearing a lawsuit coming down at you.
We also have a new Lego display. We didn't use we had a Lego shelf, but Lego has become such a prominent part of everybody's personal collections and experience, especially younger kids. Now we have a whole walkthrough aisle starting from the very beginning in 1999 through modern times. And this is one of the areas of collecting Steve has kept up on in the recent years as well.
Of the more recent acquisitions you guys have had, especially things that have been produced by fans, I'm curious, is there anything that has come through that is like a piece of fan-made art that has made you really think about the item it depicts in a new way? Like, is there some wonderful painting of a character that just made you go, I never thought about this character like this? Or just something that gives you an extra dose of warm nostalgia in your heart?
Well, yeah, go ahead.
There's so many. We have a bread sculpture.
A bread sculpture. We've added a bread sculpture recently, left here by Lucasfilm Animation when they did a wrap party for Tales of the
Empire.
I always want to say Tales of the Sith for some reason.
Mhm.
Tales of the Empire. And it's a Yaddle bread sculpture, full-size Yaddle bread sculpture that's been lacquered 5 times, so you can't break off the ears and use it as a hot dog bun. We have this wonderful portrait of Princess Leia made of buttons that was done by the child of one of our visitors. And he showed it to me on his phone, and I said, gee, that's really cool. Is that for sale? That's how some of these things work.
Mhm. And yeah, Steve purchased that, and the money went towards their art school.
Yeah.
Their art school fees. And
Love it.
that's really what I feel like Rancho Obi-Wan is really moving towards, is kind of bringing it full circle, influencing a new generation to, learn how to be artists or writers or builders.
Or astronauts.
Or astronauts. I wanted to be an astronaut. I'm not an astronaut, though.
No, you're not. You're too grounded for that.
Oh, yeah.
There's part of me that wants to go, it's not too late, Anne. You go be an astronaut. We can make it happen.
Has it been interesting watching the different generations come through the museum? I remember when we came through the museum to record our episodes, geez, it must have been at least 10, 12, probably 13 years ago. I brought my son, and he was like 8, and he's 22 now, right? I know, Anakin's a giant. And like the prequels are sort of like his nostalgia the way the classic trilogy was for me when I was, that age as a kid. And as you see new generations come in through the museum, is that interesting to see people grab onto all of the different eras of Star Wars, whether that's the prequels or Clone Wars or the sequels or the classic trilogy in different ways? Like, how do you see people coming to Star Wars through the items in the museum now, as you've been doing it for so much longer now than when you'd started? If that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, very much so. That's the amazing thing about Star Wars. There are so many entry points that you can get different generations and different people's interests served. You can look at the films, you can look at the streaming, you can look at comics, novels, toys, art. There are just all kinds of entry points and all kinds of ages. I mean, we have had families here where we've had 3 generations of the same family, grandfather, father, and son or daughter. And it's great to see. Now because of that, and because especially some of the younger kids go to Star Wars and they love, for example, Rebels. And so we have to make sure we put some Rebels toys out there. So some of the people, some of the 60-year-olds who remember the original trilogy look at the Rebels thing. Well, there's enough of the other stuff, so I guess it's okay that you have some Rebels stuff out there.
And we've had recently a lot of younger kids, 8 or 9 years old. Man, they know the Star Wars. They know more than any of us. It's amazing how it just appeals to them, and they just memorize all the facts and read all the things that they can read. They're very impressive fans.
I worked on 2 Star Wars encyclopedias so I could forget all that stuff, but have a
Well, and now there's so
kids.
much more to learn and memorize.
Oh my God, is there ever? And these kids have it down pat, even going back to the original trilogy. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
The love of Star Wars does get passed down among generations.
Yeah.
For sure.
Star Wars is definitely forever.
As the museum has evolved and included more and more stuff, have your favorite points of focus shifted over the years? Did you really love only original action figures initially, and now you're like, I really like this other thing that we have a whole bunch of? Has that changed? Just like the information, the options in merchandising have exploded.
I can't think of any single product line that hasn't had a Star Wars character, logo, art added to it, either legitimately or illegitimately.
Right.
I mean, there were Walmart in Mexico City several years ago had packaged Star Wars sanitary napkins, which were not licensed.
No?
I can't imagine
Are
why.
those in the collection?
I tried to get some. It was very difficult. You want what, sir?
But I have observed Steve having a change in his foci. Is that a word?
Focus.
It is
Yeah.
today.
When we wrote the Ultimate Action Figure Collection book, you were very much into making sure you had all the action figures, all the variations. But the way Hasbro distributed those action figures has changed over the years, and we don't typically go out hunting. So you've been doing a lot of posters.
My passion for posters has reawakened, and specifically, I got an email today from a Hungarian poster dealer who was offering me a very special horizontal Hungarian poster that I've hungered after for years.
Wait a minute. Are you sure it's not already in the flat files?
It's in the flat file, and found it. I didn't remember getting it.
I feel so much
And
better because I have stuff I don't remember I have.
I've been talking about this poster for years, and he only wanted, and it was found in an attic, and it had to be restored, and it's still not in the best of conditions, and he only wanted $12,000 for it.
Oh my goodness.
Is that all? That's just walking around money.
I was pleased to say I already had it.
Well, Steve's been so wonderful in memory of my husband Stu, who passed away last year. Steve has been collecting rock and roll posters with
Star Wars imagery on them.
Yes, exactly. Because Stu is a huge Deadhead, a Grateful Dead fan. I love music of all kinds. So Steve just started accumulating. You would just be so surprised how many rock and roll posters have the Star Wars stuff on it. What was the Neil Young poster you got with the Jawas?
Rust Never Sleeps. That
Yeah.
was the first. Back
Love.
in 1978, Neil Young started doing a series of concerts, and for some reason he had small people or kids dressed up as Jawas on stage. And so they're in the poster for the concert and the video, and on the front cover of the DVD. There's a new one coming, I just found on eBay for Slightly Stupid.
Okay.
And they've done a bunch of Star Wars related themes. They do a
Nice.
different poster for each venue, it seems.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun stuff, and it just really shows how Star Wars just seeps into even like other genres of collecting, poster collecting, rock and roll collecting. I love it.
And it's a challenge too to find, because a lot of people, when they list these rock posters on eBay, don't put Star Wars in the searchable title.
Oh, right.
But they're just not thinking along those lines that this might attract a non-rock group fan for the poster. So sometimes I'll go through 1,000 posters from the Grateful Dead, say, and see if there's anything Star Wars related. So that's been a lot of fun. As Ann said, I've really kept up on the Lego sets. There's a wonderful new 25th anniversary Lego book out for $150 from Lego that I helped with in a very small way. I was interviewed by the author, and so there's a mention and a photograph from Rancho Obi-Wan in the book. And I also helped scan the very first Star Wars Lego piece, the 1999 Toy Fair invitation, a small box that had Luke and Vader fighting each other. When you opened the invitation, it played music, played the Star Wars theme. And I helped scan that, and they now have it as sort of like our Star Wars scrapbook and Star Wars vault. So you can actually put together a cardboard version of this.
Ooh.
So there's all kinds of stuff. It just never ceases to amaze me that things show up. And a lot of stuff ends up here at Rancho.
Wonderful stuff.
Is there anything that's come out in the last 5 years on the official side that's really surprised you, that you're like, they haven't really done anything like this before, and I'm surprised that they have, and you've brought it into the museum?
I think the most incredible stuff is coming from Regal Robot these days.
Oh yeah.
Which is which has gone through the archive and has picked some really choice pieces, and they're making 3D scans of these, and they're doing prop replicas that are eerily similar or look the same as the maquettes that were done to get George to approve various concepts for creatures, especially for Return of the Jedi, Episode 1, Episode 2. And they've done some amazing pieces. They do a full-size Chewbacca figure with a bowcaster, but I don't have a spare 20,000 these days, so we'll have to pass that by for now.
Until after the fundraiser.
Well, we don't use our money to buy things.
Nope.
I buy things for myself that I then give to the collection.
Yeah, all the money we raise as Rancho Obi-Wan and at our fundraiser, it's used to run the business, insurance, utilities,
Right.
Maintenance on the building, things like that.
Fire insurance, for example, in Northern California, because of the past wildfires, has gone from about $1,000 a year to nearly $7,500 a year.
Oof.
In a period of 2 or 3 years. So there are lots of costs and upkeep for Rancho.
So we need to very slyly rob a bank so you can get a full-size Chewbacca from Regal.
Or
Robot.
sell a lot more tickets to the fundraiser on October 5th,
Yes,
which
there you
please
go.
come.
There
we
you go.
would love to have you as part of our Seattle community for that lovely evening.
Oh, it's going to be amazing. I have a question for you because I know for a lot of us that are, have our own consumer problems. Whenever there is new stuff, whenever there's a new show coming, whenever there's a new movie or a game, I mean, I know I do it and my husband does it and many of our friends do it. Or we're like, you know what I would love to see made from this property. Do you do that where you're like, what I really need from Skeleton Crew is a life-size Neil? Um,
Not so much. I mean, people used to ask me, is there any product that hasn't been made that you would like to see made? And I always used to say the Cantina holographic creatures. And then Regal Robot scanned those and produced a set of the holographic creatures from Star Wars. There's so much stuff out there that I don't want to add to the clutter.
See, my answer is I just want a 3 3/4 inch therm scissor punch from Solo. That's it. That's all. Hasbro just needs to give me that.
You don't have one yet?
They don't have one.
There's not an
Oh,
official one, but
There's not an official therm scissor punch.
I'm
They
pretty
gave
sure
you
there's
one?
an unofficial one.
There's an
Oh,
unofficial one.
It's quite
patience,
good.
it will come. It will come.
it will indeed probably
Mhm.
come.
This is another thing though, because speaking of unofficial ones, I'm curious what your take, because when we were there last time in 2018, this particular thing was just starting, which was the homemade 3D printed action figures. What are your thoughts on those? Do you have some in the collection?
We have a bunch of urban artist figures that started about 10 or 15 years ago. And they're usually sold on a card with art on the card. It's clearly a piece of art, one of maybe 25 or one of 50. There's a difference between bootlegging and fan art, fan produced
Right.
art, 2 or 3 dimensions. And so I think you run into a problem when it gets down to the second purchaser or the third purchaser who thinks they have something that's and tries to sell something as vintage this or that,
Oh,
and it's
right.
3D printed. I mean, it's a big controversy, especially among figure collectors.
Yeah.
And there are a couple of news groups that are vehemently opposed, shall we say, and dump all over people who are selling things that they shouldn't be selling.
On the flip side, one of our guests recently brought us some little tiny 1 inch three printed heads. And when it's a young person and they're learning about the science behind all this,
Yeah.
I think that's a great use Star Wars to learn how to do things, how to make things, how to
Yeah.
do science, the chemistry of it all. I think that's a good thing.
I feel like too, there are a lot of folks that are trying to fill those gaps that I don't know that we'll ever get. I don't know that we'll ever get a therm scissor punch as much as I desperately want one. I don't know that we'll ever get a Cecil Slack 3 3/4 inch figure. So there's that whole element to it where it's like, all right, if no one's gonna officially make this for us, I guess we can figure this out for ourselves. Which is an interesting space.
Well, I think the whole toy industry needs to look at this, just like recording industry and the movie industry. New technology comes along, it can be used for good or for evil. So it's a question of how it's used, who knows about it, and full disclosure.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to steal a penny from Disney. They
No.
need all the assets they can get.
If you, if you did, they would know, and there they would be.
We have a wonderful relationship with Lucasfilm still, and via Lucasfilm Disney. So we're always on our toes, and they've been very generous to us, especially recently when they've been cleaning out some of their closets,
Nice.
reducing their storage space.
I'm curious about something you said, Anne. It made me it sort of sent me down a memory hole about using Star Wars for like learning and things. And then all of a sudden I had this memory of like an R2 and 3PO like math book from like third grade from like 1986.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering how much of that's I remember going into the library, but how much of those that sort of stuff do you have in the collection?
Quite a bit.
Quite a bit. Our library is chock full now. We have double rows on the shelves. Um, but a lot of the early books, we have a pretty good collection of books up until I would say the mid 2000s.
Hmm.
Um, Novels, kids' books, workbooks, calendars, art. Did I say art books?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
But
we have
yes.
plenty of art books, so I'll say it twice.
But even like the vintage, learn all about computers
Yeah.
with 3PO and R2, and learn how to do math with Star Wars. We've got all of those things. There were a lot of those from the UK that we have in the library. There's a lot of vintage. I remember a cassette of some kind, a teaching cassette for teachers. On
Yeah, the Pendulum Press.
Yes, that's it. Mm-hmm.
Done for schools. So it came with a film strip, which had actual Star Wars cartoons that were never reproduced anywhere else. So they were done specifically for this film strip. It was the story of the Star Wars movie. And then mimeograph worksheets that you could use, put it in your old mimeograph machine with the purple ink. Does anybody remember
I
that?
Oh
remember those, yeah.
yes.
You
Oh,
get
the
purple
smell of
paint on your
mimeograph
hands.
is
Oh,
the
yeah.
best.
So yeah, and these were the worksheets. So they came with about 5 or 6 master sheets that you could use on your Mimeo, and little button for the teacher.
I think the educational element has always been really important to George Lucas. I mean, he wanted those things done. He started his own educational foundation.
Yeah.
And, we want to continue that tradition by using the love of Star Wars as a teaching tool, as an inspirational tool.
Is that sort of stuff like those film strips you talk about? And I'm thinking of other sort of bits of ephemera like R2 and 3PO's like immunization commercial or their anti-smoking ad. Is that the sort of stuff that Rancho gets a hold of and you all work to archive or preserve or digitize, or is that something Lucasfilm is doing, or is that something that if Lucasfilm calls you up and says, "Hey, do you have this?" you'd help them preserve that, or is that what's that relationship like, if at all?
Well, in the not too distant past, I would get a call from the legal department, and they would say, "Steve, do you know we're having a trademark issue in the UK? Do you know if they ever made jelly candies for The Empire Strikes Back in the shape of characters?" And I would say, "Let me look." And I would go to the shelf and I would find jelly character candy from The Empire Strikes Back from the UK. And I would take a picture of it and they would be able to prove their copyright case or their trademark case. So things like that happen quite a bit with people that I had worked with when I worked at Lucasfilm. Um, Digital assets are different. I mean, YouTube is there to serve us all and does. So all the things that you mentioned are findable on YouTube. Um, the original media was presumably part of, well, that's a good question. The original media was part of the acquisition, I guess. I mean, because I know they found when they were working on the special editions back in the late 90s, they were looking for a certain version of the original Star Wars because they were trying to find a good quality film to use to make their changes. And they found the best one in George's house in his basement. So there's a lot of that stuff still around.
This kind of brings me to a little bit of a nuts and bolts question about operations for Rancho Obi-Wan. Brian mentioned, things that are ephemeral. So I'm wondering, it's kind of a two-pronged question. One, when you have things like that, like film strips that come with, educational things or anything else that's really delicate, I'm wondering what your like preservation process is like, how you decide what things get extra attention. And also then, because I can't manage my own stuff, how do you guys stay on top of the collection in terms of just day-to-day maintenance, keeping it clean, knowing that everything's cataloged properly? What happens when things have to move a little bit? How do all of these functions work? Do we
Ugh.
have hours?
It's so hard. It's just a lot. It's a lot.
You left Oreo cookies with character imprints on them off your list.
Yes. How do we preserve those?
Inside my tummy. No.
That's the perfect place. The perfect place. We do not have a lot of the facilities that we wished we had.
Yeah.
We would love to work towards that. Thus, another good reason for our fundraiser. A lot of the things, like for example, food items. You don't want to leave soda and blue milk in your collectible containers.
Or British SpaghettiOs, which
No.
exploded on the shelf from 1999.
Or Chewbacca refried beans, of which we still need to empty and
yes.
open.
It's on the list.
We make sure that we keep most of our items away from sunlight. We keep them flat if they need to be flat, books upright. We learn a lot as we go through. We dust only once a year because there's so much.
Right.
So yeah, we do the best that we can. We want to do more. We would love to preserve more. And have expertise come in to save some of these things, like your British billboard poster 24 sheet, things of that nature. So yeah, it's a complicated answer, and it's hard.
It's just the two of us and our volunteers, so it makes it difficult. And I have stepped back, and of course, is running Rancho Obi-Wan as the president and chief executive. Thank goodness for our docents who give our tours on Saturdays, using some of the same silly stories that I told many years ago.
And our volunteers who open 20-year-old sticky soda cans.
Right, because it's an interesting thing. You started this collection as a personal collection that then became part of this public thing. Most of us are not like, I really need to have all of my preservation and restoration skills in my pocket before I get stuff. It kind of like you're growing your needs and your knowledge at the same time that the collection is growing, which seems like an incredible challenge.
I like that. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Well, even Lucasfilm, I mean, it wasn't until they decided to do that famous picture of George amidst all the models that anybody had put all of those models together in one place. And George looks around them and says, wow, we need an archive. And they founded the archive, but it was in a building behind ILM, and there wasn't much thought about preservation or spending money on it until the early 90s, when a Japanese fan and a professor, I believe, decided that he wanted to do a Star Wars exhibit in Japan, and came to the US, offered Lucasfilm not only a royalty for the exhibit, but was willing to pay for the restoration of a lot of the ships and costumes that needed restoration. And out of that, the library, and which was in charge of the archives became a separate function, and with archivists and registrars and people who are even today working on keeping the collection in good shape and preserving and mending. And so this is an evolution. It's an evolution for us too.
It seems like something that, I don't want to say Star Wars necessarily invented it, but it certainly revolutionized the idea. I mean, before then, I mean, you just trash the sets, right? Like you'd just trash everything and you wouldn't think about it, which is why, for A New Hope, that stuff is so much more rare
Yes, absolutely.
because they would just, oh, we're done with the Falcon. Where's the hammers?
Right.
Well, it's sort of like the famous MGM Studios auction in 1970 when outside forces had taken over the company and they decided to empty their own archives, which was there basically so they could use the items for other movies and change costumes around. But they found all kinds of things in there, including the ruby red slippers and dresses from famous movies. But that was sort of the wake-up call to a lot of collectors around the world who saw, well, you can own this stuff too.
It's weird to me. They never thought like, maybe this is going to be, I guess it seems like filmmakers always think that they're making a good movie and that people are going to want this stuff. Nobody's ever like, nobody's going to care about this. Maybe George would have. I don't know. He seems like maybe at that time he would have been humble enough and sort of discouraged by everything going on at A New Hope to think that maybe it wouldn't go anywhere. But
I don't think anybody knew at that time.
yeah,
It is an evolution of, Steve framed his original posters and had them trimmed, and now we wouldn't do that.
Right.
See, these are the things that we learn as time goes on, but especially not in 1977, they would not have had any place to store things. They would have needed to reuse things. So they wouldn't have thought that it was important to save.
No.
yeah.
But now we know differently.
Yeah, I feel like in filmmaking up to that point, the important thing was the film, and all of the stuff is kind of made to be temporary. It was never considered like, no, someone will want this piece of door from
Right.
from Tunisia. Of course they will. And now, now we all want every piece we can possibly get our hands on.
Well, and that's why Ann and I have done a bunch of dumpster diving over the years.
Yes,
Authorized.
we've
dumpster diving.
literally been in a dumpster together on 100-degree day.
I remember
It's
that.
so hot.
You get anything good?
Yeah. Posters
Worth every minute, every beat of sweat.
every minute. Still have those in a boxes
Yeah, in the back.
in the back.
So we're winding down on time. Do you want to give everyone information one more time about where they can get tickets and what they should expect about the fundraiser?
Yes, please go to ranchoobiwan.org. And there's a link there called Fundraiser 2024. If you click on that, you'll be able to purchase your ticket. You will also be able to see the list of auction items. And it is in Seattle at the Museum of Pop Culture, which is near the Space Needle, on October 5th, which is a Saturday, from 6 to 10 p.m.
There'll be food, drinks, frivolity all around.
Frivolity.
And there will be Ann and Steve. That
And
is
there
a
will be
draw
I
Ann.
can't
enough.
imagine. I can't imagine a time with Ann and Steve without frivolity.
Right?
Excellent.
Anything else, Holly? Before we wrap it up, where can people
No.
find you?
Oh, places. I'm
Places.
on Twitter as Surliest Girl and Instagram as SurlyGirly5, and Stuff You Missed in History Class is still Missed in History everywhere. Criminalia is still #Criminalia, and Killer Cocktails is out on October 15th, but available for pre-order now if you want cocktails and mocktails about historical true crime. How about you, Brian?
You can find me everywhere at Swankmotron. As far as Full of Sith is concerned, fullofsith.com for the entire back catalog of episodes, including our very first with Steve Sansweet. And every time we've ever visited Rancho Obi-Wan, they're all in there in the archives. And And unless there's anything else you want to remind people of, or maybe want to pitch a membership to Rancho Obi-Wan, which I finally caught up and am now a charter member
Excellent.
from the
Thank you very
beginning.
much. Yeah, memberships are also on our website, and the membership is a charitable donation to our 501c3 nonprofit museum. It is fully tax deductible. And as far as the fundraiser, there are also patronage opportunities, which are a little more than a membership, but are also 100% tax deductible. So we always appreciate any amount of donation you can give. And there are other suggestions on the webpage on how you can support us in a non-monetary way. Yeah, everything's great.
And Star Wars, as you said, is forever.
Forever.
It's true. So for super producer Mike Pilot, who is going to get this out to everyone to listen to, for Ann Newman and Steve Sansweet, and for Holly Fry, I'm Brian Young, and the Force will be with you always.
Sir, if you'll not be meeting me, I'll close down for a while.